Look at us, just a couple of weeks out from the Conservative Party convention in Calgary at the federal level to see what the review is on Pierre Poilievre and what some of the possibilities could be if he was to exit the position of leader of the party. And to talk about that, I'm delighted. Paul Micucci's here and Jim Lang is here.
How's it going?
Guys, thanks for doing a roundtable on this, because although this might be somewhat fantastical in its nature of discussion, is it really?
No, if I may, as a matter of fact, I think the conversations, this is a real tipping point for the federal Conservatives, what to do. All the polls are showing federally the Conservatives and Liberals very, very close, within 1 or 2 percentage points. But the gulf between Carney's likability and Poilievre's is massive. We'd be naive not to think that the power brokers of the Conservative Party of Canada are not thinking, if we had that person running the party, what would the numbers be? They have to say that.
Oh yeah, they have to. And you know, it's interesting coming out of their convention, coming out of it, they have to give him, if they're going to keep him as leader, they have to give him direction on how they want to conduct themselves.
Yes.
The policies they want to get behind. And I think it's a unique opportunity because, you know, when the election happened, tariffs were everything. And he stuck on his main mantra, you know, build the homes, act the tax, you know, affordability.
Fight the crime.
Fight the crime. Yeah. So there was, you know, he stuck on it. And that was a direction that they wanted to move towards in the election. Now, with this Western Hemisphere domination, and a lot more at stake than just tariffs. Tariffs is one little piece of the whole plan now. So he's coming into this and they're going to have to look at it and say, okay, yeah, we can go back and be tough on tariffs. That's fine. But it's now tough on a lot of things because you really have to figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to play. And when the parliament sits again, when you go back into the session starts, he has to figure out how he wants to conduct himself. And that's the direction, because he didn't have that. He kind of, after the election, he went quiet. You didn't hear as much.
We would have
Pierre.
Conversations where we were like, wow, he really doesn't have an opinion anymore, does he?
But then he got his seat in Alberta.
Yes.
And then it was the same old Poilievre. But then Jenny Byrne was shown the door.
Yes.
And they have new people around him sort of steering the ship.
Yeah, Steve Outhouse came in.
You're right. And that's going to be a real X factor going to the convention and throughout the rest of 2026, how much that changes Poilievre, his perception. Because right now, the perception in Canada, fair or not, hasn't changed.
Well, I will tell you this. We are headed to Calgary for the convention. Not that we've received media passes or anything yet. Not that that will stop us either. Yeah. But we'll be there having a chat with a number of people, both on the Conservative and the opposing side, that revolves around this discussion, because something obviously needs to change. In a recent poll, I found this to be this I found shocking. The likelihood of voting Conservative should Pierre Poilievre no longer be party leader. This is an Abacus poll that took place. And you know how I feel about the polls, but I'll give you the data anyway. 29% of people in Canada are more likely to vote Conservative, 12% less likely if Pierre Poilievre is replaced.
29% more likely, that's the election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If whomever the leader is, because of the last election was so close, 29%, they're the ruling government.
Well, now, I guess at this convention, the executive of the leadership sits down and they have a discussion and a review takes place. What do you think happens at that review, first of all? What do you think the discussion points are?
Oh, wow. Well, it's policies. So the first thing they're going to talk about amongst the general membership is how they feel about certain policies. So they're going to talk about MAID. They're going to talk about DEI. They're going to talk about a bunch of stuff.
Pipelines,
what their position is on all those policies.
Yeah.
And is it the right position? Is that what the membership supports? Is that what they want him to go forward with? You know, that's prior to the vote. So that's, you know, a day of just going through what the platform is, why it is what it is, and just to get the climate of the group.
And, gentlemen, you alluded to some other factors in the world now leading into the convention. I mean, let's face it, the American military and their elite tier 1 operators went in there, grabbed Maduro and his wife, and took control of Venezuela in hours. And no matter what Denmark says or NATO says, they could do the same thing to Greenland. by lunchtime. With they already have a military presence there.
I almost wonder by the time that we put this out, Greenland might have already been invaded.
So the what Donald Trump now calls the Dunroe Doctrine, which is a take on the Monroe Doctrine from the 1800s, in his vision, they want all of North America, USA, Canada, Greenland, and now Venezuela, all under their sphere with their resources and oil and minerals and whatnot. So there has to be some hard questions about Poilievre. If you're prime minister, if you're running the party, how do you handle that? Because fair or not, this is not conspiracy theory. We're seeing in real time what's happening in Venezuela and how open Trump is about his future. Canada could be next.
We also see
absolutely could be.
Our prime minister making no strategic headway in other countries so far, and he's headed to countries already that Trump is saying in his national defense strategy he doesn't want us visiting with. And so our policy as Canadians under one leadership might come under question heavier than ever, heavier definitely than in the last 10 years we've seen. And it's really the time where the Conservative Party, it could be theirs to lose again.
Well, remember, so we're maybe or potentially a few short months from another election.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, because you have budgets coming up again. And so you have the whole session starting again, budget starting again. You have all that. And will, given this climate, he be able to get the votes to get it passed? And when it happened before, so the last budget was kind of like, let it pass and we'll wait and see how he does.
Since then, no.
Yes.
Okay. Chrystia Freeland stepped aside. It's going to be a by-election.
Yep.
There's already been a number of MPs who have come forward saying they've been recruited, NDP and Conservatives, and they said thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
Yes.
So that has to tell you that Carney and the Liberals aren't convinced they'll get another vote through.
Yeah, the backdoor dealing, I think, is over for control in Parliament. I wonder, and it's funny, Paul, you bring this point up, I wonder with all of these scrutinies being placed on the budget, suddenly we got a new budget. The budget was completely different than one we've seen historically in Canada. I think even the experts have just finished digesting that. We've then seen what moves Carney has made, and will they align with the budget that he presented us? If not, you're right. He could be really under a lot of pressure.
It already doesn't.
There could be a vote of non-confidence.
Yeah, it already doesn't, right? The fact that Venezuela now is under control of the U.S. puts major pressure on what to do with the oil and gas.
Yeah.
And what to do with resources. There's been a number of announcements. You know, we're doing another show on it, so I won't circumvent the show. But there's a number of announcements that came out of major resource finds. So a lot of countries are ahead of us on the resource development side. Yeah.
And now we're trying to catch up.
And they're jumping, right? Whether it be China or whether it be gold or lithium.
Their discovery to mining timeline is so drastically different than ours because we have such net zero and so much red tape to cut through.
Yes.
Australia, many Euro countries that are making discoveries right now. China is absolutely killing it with gold at the moment,
right?
And they're just getting into the ground.
Exactly. So, you know, we have some decisions to make because we're either going to be in that market or in a big way and compete, or we're not, or we're going to be too late to the party, and that's not going to be part of the equation. So those are all the things he's got now that we didn't have in the last election, and that's such a short period. You think about it, the number of announcements since the election, the Venezuela, as you mentioned, and the invasion by the U.S., all these things weren't even there. So now, if I'm going to the convention, I'm the Conservative Party, I'm now sitting down and saying, okay, time out. How much do these things mean? Am I going to micromanage the policies here? So and I'm not calling them, when I say micro, I don't mean they're small in the fact that to people's lives, but in the big picture of things, I think people are going to want to know what we're going to do on the global stage and how we're going to compete before they're worried about affordable housing. And not that
you're right. The focus suddenly just changed dramatically.
Yeah.
So how do we keep our sovereignty? How do we start to compete globally? These really do become matters to everyday Canadians.
So Mike, you're at the inner circle of the convention, and you turn to Paul, one of the power brokers, and you say, "Let's be honest. if the election happened and Poilievre won, could he handle Trump in the current climate we are in the world? That's the question. Because it was before tariffs and that. Now we're looking at whomever is voted and decided that they should be the next leader of the Conservatives, because we believe if they are elected prime minister, they are best capable of handling Trump and what's going on in the world right now.
Let me ask you this question in response. Do you think that Pierre Poilievre could switch from cheeky combative mode to diplomatic world leader mode?
No.
And if he doesn't, how much does Trump like a cheeky leader? And we've seen this a couple of times now, Zelensky being one of them. So the risk to Canada is that the personality doesn't match with Trump. And sadly, that makes a huge difference. And personalities matching and still being able to be forceful and maintain your position with Trump, that's a real skill that I don't think we're seeing mastered by many.
And Paul, you mentioned it in a few shows. We were stunned. I was stunned that when he came back to the House of Commons after being reelected, he didn't change.
No.
The theatrics were the same. It was still high school juvenile tactics. And I think a lot of people went, oh no, he didn't learn a thing. So why, this is the big question in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so we've justified it. There's probably a chance, there's at least a chance that the leadership review comes back and votes down Poilievre, and then we go to a leadership election. So now Abacus takes one step further, and they take this poll, and they ask people, okay, if not Poilievre, who do you think would be the best leader for the Conservative Party in Canada? And the top 5, some of them not that big a surprise. Number 1 with 34% would never take the position, I don't believe, Stephen Harper.
No.
People still have love in their heart for Stephen Harper in a big way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, stable, quiet.
Statesman.
Yeah.
Not overstated, didn't overspeak.
No theatrics.
Controlled the media very well.
Yep.
Wasn't out there flamboyantly waving around, and people liked him. And success.
And
a record of success. That the truth, when the economy grows and the productivity grows, oil flows, all those things happen, people are happy.
But Paul, from your background in economics and finance, he had the brains to delegate to Jim Flaherty.
Oh yeah.
And they made a nice team.
Yeah, they did. A very good team. Their strengths were totally different. And that's what made, the country a success at the time, but a very understated success. There wasn't a lot of theatrics, and the stability was really, I have to say, part of that era was just stable. The federal government was there. They were doing their thing. They were paving the way. They were finding ways to, get things and lubricate the skids so things moved along, and your life was a lot easier. The red tape was not there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on that note, Stephen Harper alongside a Trump or a Macron or anybody on the world stage, I think is met with probably a more calm, more reasonable. Once again, Stephen Harper, if you want to consider it, go right ahead. But you're certainly in the lead in popularity, according to this poll. Number 2 is worth discussion among all of us, as we have speculated this as a group for some time. Doug Ford, 31%. Jason Kenney, 30%. Carolyn Mulroney, 29%. And Michelle Rumpel Garner at 28%. If you wanted to go beyond that, Tim Houston, Mark Mulroney, around 27% each. So having said that, the real number 1 on this list, according to Canadians, would be Doug Ford.
Yeah. Well, loved by the people, for sure. Not without some warts, but loved by the people.
Yeah.
And, had some challenges definitely on certain files that have come back to bite him a couple of times in Ontario, but the people have forgiven him. And he's got the popular vote in Ontario is very high.
It's you just nailed it right there, Paul, in a nutshell. Despite all his pitfalls, despite controversy, despite how he's perceived and everyone says, I hate him. 3 straight majorities.
Yeah. They love the party.
Right?
They love the party, and they like kind of the folksy manner with which he conducts himself. And, being forgiving of someone who once in a while says, well, I don't get it right. I go back and try it again. So it's what he's told the people. The people are fine with it.
But if I'm federally the Conservatives and I see his success in Ontario, and Ontario is the key to the next federal election, I can see why they're thinking long and hard about it.
Well, I would imagine that it's so funny because his convention and the federal convention are right on top of each other. So he won't visit Calgary, I'm sure, or have anything to do with that. Do you think that his lack of presence at the convention sort of signifies I'm not in the race?
No. A lot of times the premiers don't go to the convention, but one of the things it does cause a challenge for, it pulls a bunch of people who might have gone to make a decision. I'm going to go to his, or I'm going to go to Calgary. So it does pull some people away, which maybe that is the deciding vote. Maybe that is one of the challenges.
Strategy. Yeah.
What is
and hey, I'm not going to rock the boat. He could say, well, I stayed away. The people want me. What can I do?
Yeah.
Like, so now his hands are clean. Like, well, I didn't go there. They asked for me.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me. Now, I ask you this question that we've kind of put everybody the same lens that we put in front of everybody. How does he do in a federal election against Carney? And how does he do if elected with the global stage, in your opinion?
He would do well in small town rural Canada, in the West, in Ontario, the big cities, the inner cities. It would be a struggle. I mean, it doesn't really matter who the leader is. Those key liberal ridings in central Montreal, Toronto, big cities like that, they're going to go to the liberal leader.
Yeah.
But can he get enough of the other ridings in the Maritimes? Will it play well in the Maritimes?
I think he plays well in the Maritimes, to be honest with you. I think that same folksy.
I think he would.
Well, and if he doesn't do what Poilievre does and starts the election by garnering the support of Tim Houston and Scott Moe and all the other premiers and get behind it and have that support, that could make a big difference as well.
Mini Ford Nation.
Right. Right. Seriously.
Well, the premier conferences and having him as the lead has been a big boost for him personally with them, because they're seeing him as a leader of the group. They're seeing
building relationships.
He's building all those relationships.
Yeah.
He has time to have dinner with him. So it's been a smart move. I think, putting that together and getting them to meet so frequently has been good for him, if that is something he wants to do. And he's been quiet about it. You haven't heard much. So,
which tells me that if he's quiet about it and we haven't heard much, that tells me that maybe something's being worked on behind the scenes.
Well,
and purposely the lid's being kept on there.
Didn't you guys just say to me before the show, Corey Tanecki's headed west to
Yes, he
Alberta?
is.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a shoring up to me.
Well, it sure helps, right? So if you help the Conservative leader in BC, you get some more votes and you turn the tide. Definitely helpful if he comes through, because that's just another feather in his cap. So smart move. Those two are very tight.
They were and had a lot of success together.
They've had a lot of success, and I think they understand that they need to do better in BC. So it's a good move.
It'll be fascinating because there has to be other people around the country, even looking at objectively, even if you don't care whether Poilievre wins or not, if he didn't change after losing and is basically the same person, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
It'd be pretty weird to see a different Poilievre to that point, though, right? Wouldn't you be like,
what if he said, like, hey, I lost, I'm humbled. That happens to people after they lose.
I've got to take a new tack.
I'm taking, and maybe he'd be perceived differently, but there's no reason to perceive him differently.
Well, but can I throw, and I'm going to add a component to
Sure.
this. So part of the importance of the upcoming few days is that the membership has to provide him direction and guidance for him to go forward. So I think what's important for them as a Conservative Party is they need to sit down and they need to talk about that.
I agree.
Because, sometimes got criticized for being too tough, too militant, looking too serious. And so they have to say to him, we want a softer, or quite frankly, given the times, we might want you to go harder.
Yeah.
Right. We might want you to be more aggressive now because Canadians need that strength. And do they feel that there's a gap and that they need to be more aggressive to take leadership? to win an election, and that's something that they have to share, and the board and the membership have to vote on, and whether or not he gets an overwhelming vote, whether he gets just ekes by, whether or not they think that they want him to stay or not. After they're done, all said and done, if he does stay, they really have to give him some guidance, because I think a little bit where he got put in the middle is he came up with an approach. People were going to rallies, supporting those rallies, pushing him forward, rah, rah, rah. But they weren't voting like they were there, that's
it didn't translate to seats.
It didn't translate to seats, right? And they did a lot better. So I give them that. They had way more seats.
Well, they did great in the places where they really reached out to the community.
Really reach out to community, right? But is that going to resonate? And given the change of climate, is it going to resonate more now or less now? That's where they got to make the decision. And that is we can look to him to say it's all on him, but really it is the membership and the committee that really has to give him that guidance, because that decision that they make to push that forward will decide the future of the party.
Paul,
that'll decide.
It's such a brilliant point in your part. Think about the transition from the Liberals, dead in the water.
Yep.
Trudeau leaves, in comes Carney. They make a decision. We're going to go elbows up, Team Canada. And they won the election, and they all stuck to it.
Yeah,
with really a PR campaign,
right?
And
that was totally a PR. What the crazy thing about that is
with Mike Myers and all the commercials.
Oh yeah, they got totally away from policy.
Yeah,
I don't think any of us had heard Mark Carney's voice, to be honest with you.
And then he's in commercials.
Yeah,
he's in Stephen Colbert.
Well, and I'm sitting having dinner with people, and they're saying to me, "Well, he was a good business person, so we should let him lead." And I'm like, but I want to hear his policies. I want to hear I just want to hear what we're going to do. But
you wonder how he won a popular vote that way. It's wild.
But the Liberals had a plan, to Paul's point, and they stuck to it.
Let's do it. But that's gone. See, here's the interesting dynamic in this, which the Conservative Party, I don't know if they're going to focus on. I have any idea. But if I'm sitting in their shoes, I'm like, okay, that was then. That was the climate we're in. We're in a new climate now.
Are we ever?
So our approach. And whoever takes the right approach on this one for Canadians, how they're feeling, will win if an election is triggered in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
All I can think is she must not want to do it at all, because the one name that's not on this list,
I noticed,
is Danielle Smith.
And I was wearing my Calgary jacket. I was like, when I'm out there,
you go to Cowboys later?
I hope I see Danielle Smith, and I hope we get an interview. So I wore my jacket in today.
Yeah. Well, you know what? At the very least, you should be campaign managing for her. But it's interesting to me because she has done so much on the West Coast for not just creating an identity, but creating sort of a protection around an entire province, dealing directly with the U.S. on clever terms as best she can, and really kind of representing Canada as one of the more stable voices.
But would she play in Eastern Canada? Would she get enough support in Ontario and Eastern Canada to win an election? That's the hard question that has to be asked.
Well,
there's nothing against her, but you have to think realistically, would she get enough seats?
Well, I think she communicates better than almost any party leader that I've seen in a long time.
On her feet.
Love him or hate him, Doug Ford has got a way to connect to the average person that we've not seen in Canadian politics in a long time.
No, I can see that. What I could see also is both Doug Ford and in the opposition moment of this, I could see both of them dealing well with whatever prime minister is in place and whatever government is in front of them. They both tend to have a desire to get to the table and get things done. Right. So Doug Ford had Mark Carney to his house for the cottage, and they had a barbecue. So they would get along well. So I think that it just shocked me a little bit that I guess Danielle Smith has no desire. There's no rumblings. She's made no bones
there's
about
been no
getting
rumors,
in there.
No.
So Carolyn Mulroney, but not Danielle Smith, which I find that bizarre.
Well, she's fluently bilingual, Carolyn Mulroney, she has the Mulroney legacy,
the brand,
the brand. So the brand and the fact she's fluently bilingual, that's one reason the name is being mentioned. That you have to win some seats in Quebec.
I would say, but the other thing is, I don't know that brand name means all that much in this scenario now. I think you're right. We're in a different
Yeah.
we're in a different atmosphere globally. Certainly nationally, we're watching over a budget that's leaving people unable to feed themselves, unable to get into a home, all of these issues that we have. And at the same time, I think what we want is somebody with a policy.
Well, and look at the position she's in right now. So it's very interesting. Alberta's in this middle position right now with Venezuela and the oil production coming and everything happening, and the fact that he's going to look at Colombia and Cuba and all these places. So now, if I'm sitting in their shoes, I'm thinking to myself, I need an opinion on what we're going to do here, or maybe I have to go up. So
if you're Danielle Smith,
maybe I have to go up. Like if I'm sitting here, no one wants to be a sitting duck,
right?
So either they have to move, or.
But if she can cut a deal with that memorandum of understanding with Carney and get the pipeline to the BC coast, does that save her job?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if you noticed today, before he flew to China, he went and met with the coastal First Nations.
Yes.
Right. So I think he understands that also. I think he understands the fact that he's got to cut a deal, keep her at bay. And the last thing he wants is her either going up, trying to come up, because she has nowhere to go. The province, she has somewhere to go, but I mean, the province is stuck.
It keeps them happy.
It gets a deal done, and they sort of secures them from, saying to her, we need you to run, because quite frankly, if Pierre doesn't get the nod, if you don't, we're going to be foobarred. And
then she goes up to get it done.
Then she goes up and tries, and which then that becomes kind of a tough race, because then if you have potentially Doug Ford and her, and they're both coming up and they're both coming across, the worst thing that could happen to Carney is they co-join.
Yes.
So they decide to kind of enter into a kind of a 1-2 relationship, and because they do like each other, they
get along well. Yeah,
they seem to get along well at the premier's events. They're on camera. They seem to get along well. So quite frankly, and it does, if Carney gets that resolved, the coastal First Nations, quite frankly, are one of those groups that should be fairly easy to deal with.
And Dan McTagg, in one of her earlier shows, he did say that the Prime Minister has executive powers, that he can override EB. And if he has a deal with the coastal First Nations and he has the memorandum of understanding, the pipeline will get built and then get to the markets of Indonesia and Japan and South Korea, who are begging for our oil.
Right. Yeah. Which now's the time.
If you're going to go.
Because if you don't do that, there's no way he can go to this spring without something in the bay.
No, we definitely need a major project online by the time that
has to be resolved. So, he's got a few months left. We're in January now. So he's skating because he's got to get there, and he's got to get that resolved. If he doesn't get it resolved and it gets to budget time, election happens, then people are going to say, well, you just didn't get those issues off the table. Your major projects really were stuff that was happening anyways. He's going to get a lot of criticism. So I think he saw that today as a key. And why would you fly to BC before flying to? You wouldn't take the time.
No, he really made a round trip basically to do that.
And I think this is where you've talked about it, both of you gentlemen, that Mark Carney, this is being in high finance and hedge funds and the head of a bank for 4 decades, understanding this has to happen to get this done, and then this, and then you get that. That's a pretty shrewd move in his part.
The one thing that I will say about looking for the right leader for the Conservative Party is I think whoever it is really does need to be working in lockstep with whomever is in power. And if we happen to get a Conservative government, they need to be ready to work in lockstep with all of the areas in Canada that are polarized politically, because now that is what Canadians want. I think that we're less polarized than ever. Have you noticed, guys, as we do these shows, we seem to be coming closer and closer and closer to consensus of common sense. Yes. And I think that's where Canadians are. That's why we get the response that we get, because we're having discussions that are in line with the common sense discussions Canadians are having every day about what we should be doing next in this country.
And Mike, I mean, every day you're seeing a story Venezuela, what's happening in Iran, all these other countries. And we're like, we have to protect what we have. You say the consensus. Let's do something. Let's have win-win deals. Break down provincial trade barriers. Let's get stuff built and help each other.
Well, I think if that's not happening by the spring, then we are really staring down the barrel of an election. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that you're right, Paul. A new set of policies and approaches have to come out of this convention at the federal level for the Conservatives. At the very least. And I've got it. You're going to write in Danielle Smith on the ballot yourself.
Spalumbo's Fine Foods and Deli in Calgary. Former CFL lineman Johnny Spalumbo, and it's his mom's Italian from the old country sugo recipe, and it's some great deli sandwiches. So when you guys are at the convention, Spalumbo's Fine Food.
Shout out Spalumbo's.
A good guy in the room.
And something duly noted. We'll say that you sent us, Jim.
Yeah. I show respect.
Look, we'll see you from Calgary between here and there. Don't forget to subscribe to tplmedia.ca.
And the app.
Oh, download the app. It's beautiful. It's for the iPhone and for Android.
Yeah.
And so you can't argue over that. You can both have the app. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.